Hey, I got a few questions here from somebody asking about starting a career in game development. I thought I would go through these questions here for anyone interested. The questions are going to be in the time codes down at the bottom if you want to skip to a particular one. So, first he says, I'm technically just starting out. I'm in my first year of a bachelor's of science in computer science, and I'm 28 years old. I chose to pursue a degree instead of going straight into honing my game development skills since I wanted to have as much flexibility as possible and I want to be able to come up with an idea for a game and be able to execute it. I worry that although having development skills using a specific engine might be good in general, it might hinder my ability to develop my professional independence or get hired by any AAA dev since they mostly ask for a degree and use their own in house engine. Okay, I have a lot of thoughts on that. In addition, since game programming is a specialty, it will most likely limit my ability to get hired for any other programming role without a degree. Okay, what is your take on that? I have a lot of takes on that. First of all, I think that it's a bad thing, but the industry is coalescing around kind of one or two, maybe three or so engines. There are not a ton of engines, mostly you know, there's a few kind of in-house larger stuff, but really when I think about game engines, I think about Unity, I think about Unreal, and I think about maybe the one that is in development right now for the VR company. But that's basically all that I can think of. And obviously, there's big in-house engines like Frostbite and Decima and all this different stuff, right? But it's kind of like studio specific. Most of these studios are starting to use Unity and Unreal. Unity for mobile games predominantly, Unreal overwhelmingly for the AAA console kind of stuff. So, do I think it's bad to develop the skills in a certain engine? No, I don't think so. I think it's fine. I think it's actually like very prudent, and if anything, it helps you be more employable because when you apply at a studio like id Software, who has their own id engine, they're not going to be like, oh, you only did Unreal stuff. Well, we're not going to interview you. If you can do awesome stuff in their engine, that's cool. But having the skill that is in Unreal is going to be applicable to other engines as well. And when it comes to training up skills for Unreal Engine specifically, that's going to give you a better advantage when it comes to applying to jobs that are within the Unreal Engine framework. So I would recommend to you, if you want to make mobile games, learn Unity. If you want to make console games, learn Unreal. And don't learn Godot. Unless you want to make indie games, because no one is hiring for Godot. All right, so I think that answers your question. So there's another thing here about whether or not gameplay programming is a specialized discipline. And the answer to that is every role is specialized these days. There is no generic game developer. So you can watch my GDC talk on that. It's on my YouTube channel. I posted it recently on kind of the breakdown on that. But specializing is not going to hurt you, especially for something like gameplay programmer. That's like the most that is the most versatile programming role like in the industry, other than I don't know maybe tools programmer. So I wouldn't worry about that at all. If you're really interested in pursuing game programming, like you're gonna be fine. Okay, number two, is age something you should consider? Is age something that should consider an aspiring game developer wanting to get into the games industry? I worry when I have enough skills to be professionally viable, I'll find myself struggling to find a job, competing with younger talent. Um, I don't think you should be worried about competing with younger talent. If anything, the worry is about competing with older talent because what's happening right now in this industry is the number of positions is rapidly decreasing. There's been record layoffs and the industry is downsizing. Some might say right sizing, but it is downsizing. It's getting smaller. And the result of that is the applicant pool is becoming more saturated with people who have a lot of experience but were leaving a job because they got laid off or something like that. So I think that's really the more pressing concern for someone who's looking for a job right now in this market. So I would not worry about competing with the younger people. I think if anything, the concern is, do you have enough experience to fight against people who are, got some experience under the belt? So, you're 28 years old, so you're very young. Are you worried about so how long is it going to take to have these viable skills you mentioned? Uh, Typically it's under a year. I mean, a lot of coding boot camps can get you in a employable level at the junior or associate level roles within about 6 months. So I'm not really worried about that timeline. You could imagine something like 6 months to have enough coding skills to be useful. And then how long to find a job after that? Maybe 6 to 8 months approximately. About 50% of candidates find the role within 6 months, and then another 50%, which would be, I guess, a total of 75% within 6 months after that. So we're looking at something probably within a year if you're within a 75 percentile, or I guess as long as you're better than 25% of the applicant pool, you could find a job within a year. So I don't think it's I don't think it's that crazy. I wouldn't worry about it. 28, yeah, you're fine there. The next question is, how common is it to be a game coder and a game designer? From what I read, it's pretty common for a coder to be part of the design team if you're working for an indie developer. In AAA studios, your chances of designing gameplay aspects shrink down as a coder. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're not wrong. It's very rare the larger the studio, the more that the roles are going to be specialized. So you can watch my GDC talk, which goes into detail on that. I'll just link it in the description because it sounds like you haven't seen that, and I think it's going to answer a lot of these questions, including probably a lot of questions you don't know that you need to ask. So watch that video. So do most coders work on game design? Tangentially, they're engaged with it, particularly those who are working on something like gameplay engineering versus, let's say, something like engine technologies, where you might be pretty well divorced from the game design. So yeah, if you're passionate about design and gameplay engineering, design and engineering, gameplay engineering could be a good fit for you. If you want to be more on the design side, or maybe you have difficulty with programming and feel a little bit more comfortable scripting, then something like a technical designer could be a role for you to consider. When it comes to indie developers, there's a million different options there. But yes, indie typically means smaller studios, so there's going to be more cross-disciplinary roles. Okay, the next question. Is getting a work visa somewhat common? Gaming companies are not very common where I live, so I fear I might have to move to pursue a career. For very highly specialized roles, I think the visa is more common. But honestly, I don't really have a lot of insight on that. It's not something I've worked with a lot directly. And I think it is difficult. I think it's certainly more difficult. So it kind of depends where you are, but I think if you can show compelling skills, then maybe it's something they would consider. I don't really know. From what I understand, there are a lot of game dev roles, each with their own specialty. How flexible are you as a game programmer to switch to something else if it piques your interest, or if you want to get hands-on experience in a different role? Is it a good idea in general? All the ones you listed here, so you listed gameplay programmer, AI programmer, tools programmer. A lot of times those three are interchangeable, frankly. Graphics programmer is much more specialized. It's a totally different language in many cases if you are writing something like shader code. Game engine developer. These days, what is a game engine developer can vary a lot, especially as a lot of studios are using these third-party engines, and they're kind of relying essentially on this third party to do a lot of the engine work themselves. So it depends. Some gameplay programmers are people who are working on engine development. If it's an in-house engine, then yeah, it's pretty frequent for people to work across the line there. If you're using a third-party engine, then it's more often the case that they try and maintain the line and separate people to limit engine changes for the sake of updating it. So it depends. You've listed a lot of things, and it's kind of my answer is context sensitive to kind of the different roles you're discussing. But I would say that in general, if you want to gain experience in a different role, then I would say yes, you often have the ability to take on a task or two that's outside of your general wheelhouse, and most teams will generally allow people to experiment like that. Is it a good idea? I mean, is it a good idea to what purpose, right? If it's your passion to do something like programming, and you let's say you want to do gameplay engineering, but you start as a tools programmer, then yes, of course it's in your interest to start taking on some gameplay tasks so that you can learn a bit about how it works, right? In my GDC talk, I talk about this in the context of the career of Neil Druckmann for Naughty Dog, and how he basically did this step by step until he had the role that he aspired to do. So yes, I would say it's a good idea in general if you want to pursue a different track than the one you're in. But and this is often the case for people who kind of take a role for the sake of getting their foot in the door and then transitioning beyond that. Considering my previous concerns, what is the best course of action in your opinion? Would you go about it in a different way? Well, I don't know if I understand what you are asking here. My best course of action for what? If it's your goal to be a game programmer in game development, what would I recommend you do? I wouldn't recommend getting a degree. I would recommend doing something like a coding boot camp, getting hired as a tools engineer, and practicing building out a really solid portfolio in Unreal Engine. So that would be the course of action I recommend. I'm not sure the course of action that you are talking about, so that's the one that I would do. Okay, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution in achieving everything, but thanks for your opinion. Okay, yeah, so those are my thoughts on this situation. Obviously, I would need more details and have to go into like a private one-on-one to kind of understand the full context, but hopefully this is enough information to go off of. And for anyone else listening, hopefully this was helpful for you too. Getting insights from somebody who is, let's say, early on in their career, thinking about some of these different paths they could go down. And if you haven't seen my GDC talk, I realized I was mentioning a few times. I think it addresses a lot of these concerns. So if you're someone who is in that kind of pre-entry level position, you're trying to figure out, you're planning your path here into this industry, then that would be most helpful to you, and it will be linked in the description. Thanks.